What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Walkout Network. It's your man, Ant Walker, here with the first edition of the Living Death Show. Essentially, this show, alongside Ben and Jay, we've been doing this for I guess like 3 years now. Original iteration, when we were all three working for Sure Dog. Since then, I've moved on, and it became Unleashed, and now it is the Living Death. So expect the same level of fuckery, expect the same level of fun, and expect the same level of insight on our favorite quote unquote sport, and that is mixed martial arts. I'm really excited to start off 2022 with my two buddies that need no introduction, but we love them so much we're going to do it anyway. First up is the jack of all trades who has mastered them all. He is the senior editor of SureDog.com, and my man Ben Duffy. Ben, what's going on?
Hey, I'm doing really well. I've missed talking to you guys. I miss doing the show when we have a week or two off. So it's good to be back. I hope you both had happy holidays. Your families were safe, warm, and together.
Absolutely, man. And of course, every week the panel is anchored by the man with the stats, the facts, the figures, and the numbers. He is the associate editor of SureDog.com. Also, my good friend, Mr. Jay Petrie. Jay, what's going on?
Like both of you guys, I hope I'm refreshed. Like I feel like this time off, this not quite break, but almost break, was very important. I don't want to say super necessary. I don't want to start 2022 off like that. I'm not going to go that far. But we all needed to take a breath, and I feel like we have. And I'm looking forward to the Living Death show. I think that's a very fun introduction to the MMA world in 2022. I don't know how best to transition to the stat of the week, so I'm just going to throw it out there. So at Rizin, there was an event. There was a New Year's Eve event, Rizin 33. There's a woman named Seika Izawa who is 5-0. The stat of the week is 5. She has won 5 fights as a professional and is the number 1 atomweight in the world because she beat the brakes off of the former number 1, Ayaka Hamasaki, in a way that I've never seen before. And this girl came out of nowhere. Apparently, she started training during the pandemic. Like this is a woman who made her debut in like 2020. So 5-0 because that 5 is a hell of a way to start this year off.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, there wasn't much action over the course of the last week or whenever it was that I think we took a week off or something. So hasn't been a whole lot of action, but Rizin 33, the regular New Year's Eve show that we can expect from Japanese MMA's finest, took place. Now, throw this out to you, gentlemen, with the stat in mind that Jay just threw out there. What was the most surprising thing that happened at that event?
Dude, I mean, a little look behind the curtain at SureDog. We do 12 or 13 year-end awards, and most of them we get them voted on and get the people writing them a week or two out before the end of the year. So we kind of release them throughout the last week of December, and we know that there's an event coming on December 31st, and we're always like, if something really crazy happens, we can always go back and amend and say, okay, this wasn't the knockout of the year after all. There was a last-minute contender that snuck in under the wire. In any other year, Seika Izawa beating Ayaka Hamasaki might well have won upset of the year. There were a bunch of unexpected outcomes at Rizin 33. I mean, we weren't even going to do a rankings update on SureDog's front page, and we had to because the atomweight division got turned like ass over tea kettle. First, I mean, on the men's side, Hiromasa Ogikubo won the bantamweight tournament, beating like higher status fighters at the moment, like your Kaya Sakura types. But Ogikubo, he's been a good kind of fringe contender and just solid flyweight / bantamweight for a long time. So it's just this is what happens when you do one night tournaments. A guy, the fresher guy, it more than doubles the amount of unpredictability and chaos that there already is in mixed martial arts, which is why they're fun and why they're terrible. Siwoo Park beating Rina Kubota, big upset. I mean, Kubota's like had a couple of losses recently, but Siwoo Park kind of came out of nowhere and beat a ranked atomweight. But no, Seika Izawa, because it's not just that she beat Hamasaki, it's how she beat her. Because she pounded her out on the ground, but before that, she was soundly out grappling her. Just complete domination. And that's not what you expect from someone who is the protege of and uh, basically fights kind of like the second coming of
Megumi.
Megumi Fuji. I mean, we're talking about a woman who's 23 and 4 or something, and has been one of the top pound for pound women in the sport for like 5 years. Even if Hamasaki is pushing 40 and at the tail end of her career, she had not really shown much sign of slowing down. So to see her dominated in her element like this was really, really an eye opener. In terms of the who, the when, and the how, this is probably my number 2 upset of the year.
And for the sake of conversation, so I don't just go, yeah, that, because it was that. I will note something.
Thank you.
Yes, I will note that not all this is actually a recent phenomenon since actually the pandemic started, oddly enough, that Ryzen cards don't typically get international betting lines like Five Dimes and any of those names that you think of don't typically cover Ryzen anymore, which is strange because betting spheres now cover like grappling events. So everybody's everybody's going crazy on betting, but for some reason Ryzen was left behind. And Ryzen, the betting lines actually did come out from major lines like Five Dimes about this fight card, and Hamasaki was like a minus 350. No big deal or whatever, stuff like that. So the reason why I'm going to say my biggest upset wasn't that is because I was shocked, completely blown away that Reina Kubota was a 25-1 minus 2,500 favorite or so, 2475 or something ludicrous like that. And there was action on it. So this wasn't just somebody put the line up and it went up. People were throwing money on it to make it that Reina was such a overwhelming, unbelievable favorite over Siwoo Park. I mean, I get it. Her only 2 fights against, recent fights, I guess, were against Ikazawa, and she got beat up, and Sorayashima, who is also on the top of our atomweight division by just blasting through and winning a fight over somebody nobody expected she'd win against. So Woo Park kind of came in with not a lot of momentum, so everybody expected Reina was just going to walk through her because she does that sometimes, and that didn't happen. So I think my biggest surprise is the fact that Reina was such a massive, unbelievable favorite. 2,500 odds, you don't get those.
An unwarranted favorite.
Oh, absolutely. I expected she'd be like 400, 450 because, I figure she's going to win, but to be that level of a favorite and that level of an upset is bigger upset than any like on the betting line.
That's Kayla Harris. That's Kayla Harrison level odds. And yes, Reina Kubota should not be a Kayla Harrison favorite over anybody.
No, and not only that, it's the upset itself of Park at like plus, what was it, plus 1250, plus something like that. So plus 1275. She was plus 1275, which is like up there with like Sokuju beating Little Nog. Like as in terms of all time betting upsets, this actually is like in the top 3 now, but it didn't feel like it. So in terms of that oddity, I'm going to say that's why I'm so shocked about that, because of the whole thing that came into it. Now, Ant, I know you watched this event intently, and I know you are just watching every split second of it, but you remember Hero from that season of Tough, right? It was the big flyweight tournament, and everybody came up, and they took all the flyweights from everybody, and I think Tim Elliott was in there, and Pantoja. It was it was like Tough 24 or something. It was a good season, and Hero beat Pantoja. I think he lost to Elliott in the finals, actually. So you know of Hero, and you know of him enough. So to see him kind of get his due, do you have any feeling on his how he's turned out?
I mean, I think it's always good to see fighters from that have somehow come through the UFC ecosystem and not made it go elsewhere and find success. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway. He obviously was good enough to have the world's premier promotion interested in him. It didn't work out under that artificial format. I mean, we've gone on and on about how silly Tough is, just the concept of it, and actually trying to pick the best fighters in the world from such a false, just really weird, contrived environment. but it's very good to see someone who failed in that ecosystem go out there and do something spectacular that for him now cements his run as a true elite fighter, and that's always a plus to see. So I'm happy to see, and it puts Japanese MMA on the map more. It puts Ryzen on the map more. It just spreads the shine across other promotions. So I'm all for it, man.
Yeah, I had to kind of put you on the spot there, but just to kind of to bolster Hero his accolades, because we knew him as a tough guy, and we knew him basically from that famous gif where he's sitting there eating chips at the table and he looks at the camera and kind of grins like a Sakuraba kind of style. And in the meantime, the only people that have beaten him this decade, Horiguchi in a rematch, and Asakura, who he just beat. And he's fought like 20 times since then. So this is this was yet another, whoa, he did it, and we shouldn't be surprised, but we're surprised because of how he did it. Because tournaments are wild, man. Like there's word that Kai Asakura hurt his hand in his first fight, and tournaments to be crazy, yo.
I mean, I love them for just the car crash factor and the any wild thing could happen factor. But as someone who has to hash out the rankings on a weekly basis, like if a guy beats another guy who's more tired and has a broken hand, do you automatically have to rank him ahead of him? Like it just sucks.
I have no idea what would happen if that fight happened in like a month and a half.
What was Mark Coleman really the best heavyweight in the world the night he won the Pride 2000 Grand Prix?
Yes.
No. Like he like slalomed down between like obstacles on the way down, and it's an amazing story, and it's arguably the capstone of his career, even over being the first UFC heavyweight champion. But it's just a nightmare. Like it has no place. Like top fighters in the sport today have no place like being in one night tournaments. Ugh.
I mean, if you think about this tournaments period, as much as we love them, like does Daniel Cormier really win the Strikeforce Heavyweight Grand Prix if Overeem didn't leave? Or there's so many.
He's like a guy in a marathon who like comes out from an alley 100 yards before the end and like slams Josh Barnett on his head on his way to the finish line.
He chugs a Gatorade, two blocks away from the finish line, and then
pours it all down himself so he looks sweaty.
Yeah, man. So, but it really cool action from Japan on New Year's Eve, and MMA Twitter was ablaze about this, and more active than I've seen past New Year's shows. I think maybe with the exception of the Rise and Bellator co-promoted event.
Yeah,
that might be the one exception where I'm like, okay, this seems to be generating more buzz, but yeah, man, great work for Ryzen right there. So some nice late entry candidates for things to remember for 2021, which will be coming up shortly in our discussions here. But let's start off
something we won't be able to talk about how to intervene. When is the last time you guys remember a stomp knockout? It's been a good while. It's been a real good while. It's been 5 years for me.
I've seen him on World Star.
I mean, yeah, of course.
We
got street beefs and all that stuff. But I'm talking like like in a ring with a stomp
with like a referee and stuff. Like, yeah,
got one of those.
Yeah, you don't see those too often.
Vanderlei Silva saw it. He got so excited he ran out like the side door of his house and hid.
Like the closest we probably have seen to that is when was like Khalil Roundtree just stomp kick dude's knee out. Like that's probably the closest we've seen to like a true stomp knockout, and that's only called a stomp because of the mechanics of a side kick. That's just pure technicality. So yeah, people gonna love that in the comments. So fellas, 2022 has been off to a great start for the news cycle. Our 2021 potential fighter of the year candidate Jake Paul has decided to throw the gauntlet down on Dana White yet again, calling out the UFC and Dana White in particular in an epic social media post detailing how he wants to fight Jorge Masvidal, and if it happens in the UFC, how it means he has to retire from boxing. But the UFC has to in turn give the fighters their fair share of revenue. They have to provide medical insurance, etc., etc. What is the goal of one Jake Paul in his tirade against the UFC's figurehead Dana White?
His goal is to draw attention to himself. His goal is to draw attention to himself with the end goal of making more money for himself. Like that's it. Full stop. Like this is a gimmick that draws attention. It is clearly effective. It taps into a very polarizing subject because especially the social media MMA community it's polarized. There are people who just support the UFC as a brand, as a badge, over really any of its individual athletes. And to them, Dana White is the star of the UFC. And then there's the other, on the opposite end, there's people that criticize almost everything the UFC does. And certainly its treatment of its fighters is front and center of their problems with the promotion. It's effective. And I think it is born of probably he actually feels this way, but he's just amplified this and made it kind of the point of the stick that he uses to poke the UFC. And I see like calling him out for his motivations, like, well, he's just doing this for attention and for money. Well, no fucking shit, he's doing it for attention and for money. Like he's not a nonprofit. He's a budding fight promoter and fighter, and he has very, very thin accomplishments on the ground to go with. So he's famous for being famous. He's gonna do this, and I don't care that it's hypocritical. I don't care that he's there to make money for himself. Like I think he's drawing attention to himself and to a legitimate issue with the sport, and probably the biggest issue holding the sport back. Like probably the biggest issue holding the sport back is that from the top down, the biggest promotion in the world just grotesquely underpays and mistreats most of its fighters. Like that's it. That's the biggest problem with the sport.
So, guys, I want to throw something back at you based on something you said, Ben. Can we really call Jake Paul hypocritical? He's actually getting fighters paid. He's actually sacrificed some of his fight purses to give to fighters on the undercard. He's giving opportunities that some people just would not have had. I mean, Tyron Woodley just got finished saying that this is the biggest check he's ever gotten. This is coming from a four-time UFC champion. So, can we call him hypocritical? I mean, this is self-serving, but
Yeah. And I'm not calling him hypocritical myself. Like I'm just saying that's what people clap back at him. I think he's certainly self-interested, but there's no fault with that. There's no problem with that.
I mean, at this point, it almost seems like trickle down effect that he will take the lion's share of whatever money comes to him and then pay some of it forward. I'm not sure about him paying the guys in the undercard. That was reported, but I don't believe it was ever verified. It was one of those things you can claim, and then you claim it, and then people talk about it, like kind of like those MMA payout sites that are like, here's the money that says, and these numbers are based up on absolutely nothing, and these are estimates based on 2020, 2005 numbers, and we don't know anything we're talking about here. Jake Paul, which I guess this is the Jake Paul. This isn't Logan. I guess it is all self-serving. It is the best. Here's why it's so effective, because it's the one thing that Dana White's going to yell back at. So he has Dana White's attention. And if he has Dana White's attention and Dana's making videos talking to him, people are paying attention to him being Paul. So this is, I mean, it's a well-crafted social media / marketing / I don't know, public relations kind of situation where he is getting in the headlines to try and turn away from Woodley versus Paul bombs, Woodley versus Paul 2 bombs, because that was kind of a thing that kind of spread around a little while. It's like the MMA equivalent of like Disney creating a pop band and just creating and honing and crafting a message and an approach and a style and an event and everything. It's all crafted. So, good for you, kid. Get paid. You're not going to change anything. And I know you don't want to actually have anything changed because, this is all for you. And we know that you're an all for you kind of person. Like we know this by, you going to do things that, questionable things to build your brand. So it's just, I'm so cynical about it because we have nothing but history to look at from this goofball. So why would he suddenly become altruistic? No, no, it ain't it.
You know, I'm
Damn, Brett, you sound like a hater.
man, I feel like my opinion on him is softening quite a bit. Um, and I understand, yes, this is not he didn't suddenly wake up and decide that he's going to be charitable and he's going to change the world, and that's clearly not what's going on. This guy is a businessman himself, and he is in the business of making himself money. But I'm leaning toward this man being the best promoter in the fight game right now. Um, who is able to generate more interest with little to no actual reality behind it than Jake Paul at this moment?
Judge
What?
sit your tongue.
Well, yeah, it's true. Yeah. Hey, he offers us superheroes or whatever the hell and CGI fights that were filmed like 3 years ago. I like when you look back, you see Dana trashing champions. Like you see what he's doing to Francis Ngannou right now. You see what he has done to champions of the past. You see the relationship he had with Chris Cyborg. You see how he has gone out of his way to undermine the people that he is trying to package and sell to us. But then we see this guy who might be a tremendous jackass, who obviously has some serious issues as far as the attention he wants to get, and whatever the case may be, and the come up of him and his brother certainly leaves a lot to be desired as far as decency and humanity is concerned. But no one has the true Carnival Barker sense of a fight promoter that man has at this moment. Because it surely ain't Dana, and damn sure ain't Scott Coker. He's too chill. Chatri is just in his own category. Bob Arum ain't it. Lou DiBella ain't it. Like you name your fight promoter of choice, Jake Paul is beating them at that game, at promoting a fight. You think about the absolute just shit shows that he has put together and has made and actually made money from. That is a true fight promoter right there. My opinion is softening big time on and then the fact that he's bringing attention to these concerns. How telling is it? And a lot of people now are really noticing, like, oh, when Dana responds, he doesn't address a word of the actual substance and what Paul is throwing his way. It turns into a back and forth name calling fest, in which case you're not going to beat a YouTuber at that, bro. You're not. Like you're like 55 or something, with TRT dripping out of your pores. My man, you can't hang with him when it comes to that. I like Jake Paul right now. I'm gonna just go out and say it.
And I mean, a lot of people kind of dunked on the reported 65,000 pay-per-view buys for the second Woodley fight, but that means he made $3 or $4 million from a fight that literally nobody wanted to see.
Like, and that doesn't include the digital sales.
That was only on cable.
Yeah.
Terrestrial.
Which,
so
when you're a YouTube star, your fan base is not, pressing OK on the cable box remote.
Yeah.
Their moms are.
Yeah. So yeah. I think this guy was it Dungeons and Dragons or something with like the chaotic good and neutral evil and all that stuff. And this guy is chaotic good in my opinion. Now he's or is it like evil
I give
good
chaotic
or something?
Neutral. He's
regardless of his own motivations, he's a force for good right now.
Yeah.
I can't give him that much credit. Now hold on. Just to make clear, this is not me defending or putting on anything on the side of Dana White and the UFC in any way. That's not at all. I don't. It's merely the Paul self-interest that I point out. It's a hot button issue. It's the equivalent of somebody licensing those rude things to say to the president, the F the president kind of thing in coded language, and selling those shirts because it's a popular thing to touch on. People are going to go, oh my god, and be up in arms about it. And when it comes to fighter pay, it is an important issue. Duffy is right. It is probably the most important issue in this sport right now, because the UFC pays what, 16% of its revenue, maybe, and it's doing better, and it's paying fighters better than other leagues. Imagine Extreme Challenge over in Iowa, where guys get $100 and a beer ticket to get brain damage. It's the sport doesn't pay enough as a whole, and the UFC, its minimum of $12K a fight is hard to say. So yeah, I guess I can give Paul credit for kind of taking the torch, but I don't feel like he's taking the torch. I feel like he's saying it because he knows that's going to get a reaction. Like it's not doing good for the sake of doing good. It's doing good because I can make money off of it.
Right.
And that,
But if good is being done,
yeah, like I don't
though?
care. I don't care about his absolutely. Like Tyron Woodley is probably the most mistreated UFC champion of the modern era, and he got two of the best paychecks of his career. That is a net good.
all it cost him was half of his IQ.
See, I think we talked about this last year, was that I think that the loss hurt his legacy. So I think $500,000 to me doesn't make up for. I now think of Tyron Woodley less as an MMA fighter because of an embarrassing boxing knockout.
Shit, that legacy is
It was
$900,000
$900,000 after Jake Paul capped him off. It was like $900,000, and legacy doesn't feed his family. He doesn't owe us a legacy. He owes his family.
His rap albums feed his family.
His rap albums have done more damage to his legacy than anything.
Yeah,
and studio time's expensive, so that takes away from his ability to pay bills. Like I think I think he is just even bringing the subject to light. In the same breath, Dana White is going up to the podium after every UFC event and talking about how big the numbers are, how well they're doing, while Endeavor is giving interviews about how much money the UFC is generating, how they want to sell more ad space on the octagon floor, all sorts of things like that. And while you have someone pointing out, hey, they're doing this and not paying the fighters, it does a lot. It does a lot, especially someone with his reach.
It's also worth noting that this whole angle came to him. He didn't go to it. He started on this because he saw how eager current and ex MMA stars were to make checks at boxing. So he's just sitting there like, oh, even if he didn't know the first thing about MMA before this, he's like, oh, these guys whose names I recognize off posters, they need checks for fist punching. It's like, oh, that's a problem. You do half an hour of Googling, you're like, oh, UFC fighter pays a problem. I can pick at this.
Yeah. Man sees an opportunity. He's pulling at the thread. I don't mind it at all. In fact, I find it very entertaining.
I like, here's one positive though, I guess, since I'm very, very Debbie Downer right now, that it is being discussed and it's being brought up, and it is something that has to be faced publicly on social media. Even if Dana completely deflects and goes after him personally and weird whatever, cocaine, steroids, whatever the whole blah blah thing they're talking about there, at least it does come into the sphere. Now I will argue against Paul's influence, because Paul's fans are 14, so they're not people who the demographic that he represents and push for. I'm joking to a degree, but at the extent his demographic isn't the demographic that will be able to do anything in this current juncture for pushing for fighters. I mean, we know that the demographic for people watching fights is 40, 45 is the average age now. If we have some 40-year-olds that cover this sport and address it anyway, it's good that it's up. It's good that we're talking about this instead of Conor McGregor. So I guess that's a net positive.
I'm always happy to not talk about Conor McGregor.
I'm okay with that. Yeah.
So I definitely give you that. But I'll push back just a little bit, Jake.
Please.
So if the thing is, it's not necessarily about the demographic that follows him as a YouTuber. It's the fact that he is a pop culture sensation right now. Pop culture is the general culture. So if someone who is a big star in just the general celebrity world is shining a light on something, that means something. When we're talking about our fight bubble, I know we are so wrapped up into fights that we don't understand how niche our community is.
It's
Like
it's
how
it's it's one
oh,
inside of one.
it's a microcosm, and
Yes.
we are in a microcosm of a microcosm as far as our focus on mixed martial arts. So when anyone from outside of that world points a finger at something and says, "Hey, this is going on," people pay attention. Um, so I do think while it's not him, like I someone tweeted me about like, well, if he really cared, he'd have all of his followers like call their senators to support the Ali Act, and then of course, yeah, you could do stuff like that, but that's not what he does. This is clearly him getting attention, him getting money in the way he knows how to get money. But in the
Like getting under
meantime,
somebody's skin.
yeah, in the meantime, he's rattling the cage, and sometimes it just takes someone to rattle the cage to get people talking, and I think that's what he's doing.
Hey man, squeaky wheel.
You know it. All right, fellas. So let's keep things pushing because we don't want this to be the Paul hour. So what a better time to transition into for the first time in 2022, the best titled segment in all of media history. That's I'm Not Surprised, Mr. Falcons. This is where we share something that surprised us or ironically did not since we last met. So Ben, I'll begin with you. What's your I'm Not Surprised, Mr. Falcons moment this week?
You guys are both old enough to remember the second Gulf War, like, right after 9/11, when we just flexed and paved Iraq. You guys remember the Iraqi information minister? The guy that was just like, there are no American tanks in Baghdad, while like there's just like flames and like rockets behind him,
Yeah.
and like tanks parked in his parking spot, like outside that building. I was just amazed to see one of my favorite personalities in the entire fight business, Waleed Ismail, weigh in with two of the most difficult to defend takes I can imagine. And this is just hot off the presses today. Two things he said, and these are about, his clients, because he has gone from being a jiu-jitsu legend. I think he's the first guy to tap out Royce Gracie in competition. Then, a very good MMA fighter, the founder of Jungle Fight, and he's also a manager. Two things he said. One is that Paulo Costa's next fight in the UFC will be at heavyweight.
Oh,
I disagree. In fact, I think it is more likely that Paulo Costa never fights at middleweight again.
wait, hold on, time out.
No, I'm sorry. No, his next fight will be at middleweight. Did I say
No,
heavyweight?
yeah.
Yeah,
No,
okay.
sorry.
Yeah.
Middleweight.
Oh, okay.
No, Waleed said that Paulo Costa's next fight in the UFC will be at middleweight, and I disagree.
Okay.
I
That's crazy.
think it is more likely that Costa will never fight at middleweight again anywhere. In fact, like I will acknowledge and apologize on this show if his next fight is booked at middleweight and he makes the middleweight limit, because I don't see it coming. I think Costa's motivation level crested for the Adesanya fight. I don't think we'll see the Costa of the way up ever again. Number two is that Priscilla Cachoeira only accidentally did those eye pokes, and like she's totally not going to lose her job.
I have eyes.
Dude,
I could see.
you have eyes, unlike her
her
opponents.
eye. Yeah.
Like, dude, gouge me once, shame on you. Gouge me twice, you get out of the UFC. Like, just completely bizarre. And I mean, obviously, he's a really over the top guy, but I
No,
don't
he's not.
usually see him like standing with 1 foot each on two hills that are really, really weird hills to die on. So, I am very surprised, Mr. Falcons.
All right, Jay, what's your I'm Not Surprised, Mr. Falcons moment this week?
So all this talk about Ryzen really kind of got me thinking about the event as a whole. And it's weird to say because of how excited about some of the outcomes were. Hero winning it all as the the dark horse that wasn't really, people are like, oh, he might get there, but he's going to get destroyed by Naoki Inoue. Oh, he's going to, if he gets past him, Kyle Sakura is going to do what he did last time. And the other shocking results, Siwoo Park beating Reina, Seika Ozawa becoming the number one atomweight in the world, despite, and the stomp knockout I mentioned, despite all of that, the card didn't hold up. And I say that even though Takanori Gomi fought a 6-minute quasi-weird boxing match with Tenshin Nasukawa and actually held his own, because Tenshin Nasukawa, he's not about hands. He's a kickboxer that throws really good kicks.
Also, he's like 50 pounds smaller.
Yeah, and Gomi held his own despite all that. It just I maybe I was just a little tired from having to stay up all night to watch it, but I love doing that. I did that for years. I remember all the dreams and all the Sengokus and the K1s and all the big New Year's Eve shows back then, the last decade at least. It just it rang hollow. I didn't have a ton of huge takeaways other than okay, there's some new blood, I suppose. And that's tough because this is a Ryzen New Year's Eve bash. I left with more negative feelings than positive feelings as a whole. Like Ryzen has been leaning into this guy called Shibatar, who is this YouTuber who doesn't know how to fight. Basically, he's like as a pro, he's like 4-9, and he falls over, and he's a goofball, and he's a character playing an MMA fighter, but he actually takes punches and kicks. And then he'll fight people that are like 50 pounds smaller than him, and they'll be like, "Oh wow, this guy isn't hurting him." Yeah, because he's got 20 pounds on him, 30 pounds on him, 50 pounds on him, and they're leaning more into spectacle of the wrong variety. Because when we look at Bob Sapp versus Akabono, when it's like 720 pounds or however much that lined up, we could look and laugh. But Ryzen seems to be putting on these shows, taking it seriously now. And I think that's the difference, that it feels like this is all being taken seriously. And the spectacle is supposed to be the spectacle. The carnival is supposed to be the carnival. But it feels like they're actually passing these off as legitimate affairs, and they shouldn't. You have to pick a lane. When you're going bizarre, go bizarre. Don't be the straight man and show a carnival fight with a straight face and be like, this is the fate of our heavyweight divisions up for grabs. And I think that kind of disheartened me a little bit because it felt like there was not as much fun as there was the spectacle, but it's like, yeah, we're taking it seriously. And I know Ben has a lot of more thoughts on this. I can see it. He wants to burst out of his face. I'd give this event like a C, despite what happened, despite all the madness that happened. And I don't know. I mean, it's possible that there was the fact that it was no international involvement. It was an all Japan card, basically, and the people that live in Japan because of COVID. But for a New Year's Eve show, it just, I don't know. I maybe I like the band's older material better than the new stuff. I don't know. What do you think, Duffy? Am I broken here?
Who hurt you, Jay?
I got hurt. I got hurt badly.
Show me on the goat where the bad man touched you, Jay.
On the bottom right there.
Yeah.
Oh, there
like,
it goes.
Dude, like Jay is just coming into the new year, like laying waste to everything. He's like the monster from Cloverfield, just like stomping on buildings. He's like stomping on Jake Paul. He's like stomping on the Saitama Super Arena.
I didn't have fun, and I think that blew me away. I didn't have fun, and I'm supposed to have fun. This is a New Year's Eve extravaganza,
Jay's New Year's resolutions list is like, no motherfucker is ever going to call me too optimistic on my own show again.
Heck no. Jed Mashu, come back on the show. We'll talk.
Unbelievable.
I don't know
Jay
if I drank
so
too much
angry
Haterade.
this year.
It just felt like something. All of the fun was drained out of it, and it was just here. Take these fights. Shut up, and then we're going to move on to next year.
All right. 2022 is my official 2022 prediction is Jay burns out.
I might burn out.
Oh man! All right. Well,
I'm not burn out than fade away.
That's a good point. I'm not surprised. Mr. Falcon's moment comes courtesy of Cody Garbrandt, who I don't know if I'm surprised or not surprised by this because he has said a few days ago on a podcast, I think it's called Rolling with the Homies, I think is the name of the show. He said that he is intending on fighting at flyweight again, which, after getting, lamped by Kakar France, who's not known necessarily as the hardest hitter in the division, they're getting, decimated so easily. Yeah, coming in there dehydrated with a little less fluid around your brain just doesn't seem like a good idea to revisit. He also said that bantamweight is still an option for him, and he is targeting a fight with Sean O'Malley. So Cody Garbrandt is determined to lose more brain cells. That is the takeaway from my perspective there. So not surprised, Mr. Falcons.
Can I say that I would like to see Cody Garbrandt versus Sergio Pettis more than anything that he could do in the UFC right now? I want to see him go
I'm
to
not mad at that.
Bellator, beat one guy, and get a shot at Pettis.
I
Anyway.
would enjoy that fight.
I don't mind
be
that
at
at all.
135.
Yeah, it'd have to be. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I don't mind that one bit. All right, fellas. So let's keep things moving because we do have to wrap up the year that was 2021. So let's start off first with submissions. We saw some interesting ways to twist the human body into a pretzel and force a tap. Ben, can you read off some of the candidates for submission of the year?
You know what? That's the only one where once the first candidate came in, like nobody added any others to the list. Like Andre Muniz, like twisting Jacare's arm halfway off at UFC 262 back in May was like, I don't think we even added anything else to that one. Like our knockout of the year list is like 15 candidates long. Upset of the year, fight of the year, they're all long. Submission of the year, it was pretty much sewn up, and I was in the room, like I was in the literal room for that one, and in a deafening arena with 18,000 people in it, I'm probably 60 feet away. I could hear that snap clear as day. I mean, there's a reason nobody put anything else on the list after May, because it's what you do and how you do it and to whom that matters. And Jacare, yeah, he had been on a losing streak, but those were related to his chin was failing him, his gas tank was failing him. He didn't seem to be truly happy at middleweight or light heavyweight. None of that mattered because he wasn't tired. He wasn't rocked. He got beaten in his own wheelhouse. Fresh, dry, not tired, got caught in a scramble just by a younger, hungrier grappler. And once Muniz had that really nice transition, he took the technique to its logical conclusion. I have lists of candidates for other things, but Andre Muniz breaking Jacare's arm at UFC 262 is my submission of the year.
It looks like you're in agreement, Jay.
This was a really tough category because anytime I'd want to put a submission on the list, I'd be like, it doesn't come close to what it, the Jacare getting submitted kind of thing. Now, I know there's a certain handsome gentleman in early 2019 who wrote up Sherdog's 2018 submission of the year, which was Ryan Hall for BJ Penn. I believe somebody can recall that. Now, the heel hook was slick. The whole what Hall did to get the submission was very well done and okay, awesome. But it was that he submitted BJ Penn.
Yeah.
Nobody had submitted. Nobody had done it. It was that level of wow. I can't believe somebody finally got BJ Penn. You think of Josh Barnett submitting Dean Lister. And I think it was Metamoris or something. We're like, I haven't seen Dean Lister get submitted in like 15 years.
And he did it with like the WMMA Starfold joke.
Just the Starfold thing. Now, and it's that same gravitas when it comes to Jacare. It would be like if Damian Maia got submitted or Verdum got tapped out now. It just, you can't fathom that person getting submitted. And when it comes to that, I don't care if there's a really slick Darce choke that Vicente Luque pulls off on Mirko Chiesa. Beautiful, well done. But he didn't submit Jacare. AJ McKee winning the tournament by putting Patricio Pitbull to sleep in 2 minutes or something incredible like that. Won the tournament pound for pound level, but he tapped out Patricio Pitbull. Awesome, cool, great achievement. Actually more relevant in the current rankings. But who else was there? Like Rodolfo Vieira getting submitted should have had by Fluffy Hernandez after he totally burned his gas tank was that kind of level. But we hadn't seen Rodolfo Vieira in his MMA career for a very long time. We've seen him as an incredible grappler and always wondered what he'd turn out. And he was 7-0 at the time. So it didn't have that same kind of meaning as look at the people whose Jacare has faced over the years. And no one had even clubbed and subbed him. So for Muniz to get him and snap his arm in half, it's all day for me.
Yeah, I don't think this category deserves a whole lot of debate. I mean, this was very clear cut, and there were some other cool submissions that happened last year. The thing is, though, those submissions were either, I think, set up primarily based on strikes, or it's more about the moment that they took place. Like we could talk about Pena submitting Nunez, and that was a big thing. McKee submitting Pitbull, a big moment, but not necessarily the submission itself that was the focal point. I mean, this was a guy who out grappled Jacare and snapped his arm. Like
Mhm.
that just means something else. That's just a different level. So submission of the year, pretty clear cut, and I can definitely understand why not many things were added to that list after that arm snap. So yeah, congrats to Jacare's arm. I don't know. Yeah. All right, fellas. So let's keep things going here because, of course, the other way to finish your opponent in mixed martial arts is by separating them from their consciousness. What is your knockout of the year?
I think I'll step on this landmine first because it didn't actually separate somebody from their consciousness. Nevertheless, I feel like it deserves it. I said this, I think I said this a couple months ago in jest almost, but then I sat down and really thought about it and went, Chris Barnett shouldn't be able to do that. He shouldn't be able to move like that in the second round as he and John Vellante are kind of doing whatever their dance is. They're kicking each other back and forth. And it wasn't a thrilling fight until that moment. But then that moment happened where 260 pounds, all 5'9" of Chris Barnett whips around and nails a much taller John Vellante in the side of the head with his heel with a spinning wheel kick and puts him down. Now he had to jump on his back and kind of Donkey Kong punch him out. So, it wasn't just a clean knockout like Ignacio Bahamondes putting Roosevelt Roberts all the way out, like
Mhm.
a near Terry Edom. But there was something special about seeing a guy like that move like that. When I was covering Dana White's Contender Series, Josh Parisian hit a spinning back fist knockout, and it was the first heavyweight to ever land a spinning back fist knockout in any Zuffa organization, like all of them, all the way back, all the way back. You spinning strike knockouts, you can probably count them on your hand. I think Mark Hunt getting his head kicked off or his forehead getting kicked off by Junior Dos Santos, I think was the first one. And Junior Dos Santos is a much more athletic. I can see him doing that kind of thing than Huggy Bear doing what he did. So even though there were incredible knockouts, not KO knockouts, Usman lamping Jorge Masvidal was outstanding. Rose Namajunas getting up there in a minute and change and putting Weili Zhang all the way out with a head kick was just artwork. Speaking of head kicks, Emily Ducote, when
Mhm.
she fought Danielle Taylor in Invicta and had landed that punch, and Danielle Taylor was in the Mortal Kombat kind of, and then she kicked her in the head, just absolute perfection. And then you think about so many others that happened this year. It's hard for me to say with a straight face almost that Chris Barnett deserves it over here Prochaska hitting that spinning back elbow to knock Dominic Reyes and his whole family out. But I still have Chris Barnett in that top spot. And I don't think it's the number one pick because Sergio Pettis is out there, Corey Sandhagen's out there, Derek Lewis is out there. Oh my God, we have such an embarrassment of riches. The only thing I'll say, because I've gone on for a long time, is that we had more knockouts in the UFC than any year ever. And some of them really, really mattered.
It's just there's just so many to choose from here, and I think it's separating the categories of knockouts might make it a little more easy to go through because the physical wonder of what Huggy Bear did to John Vellante is I mean that's amazing. I think when the
You
week
could teach a
after it
course in
happened,
physics on that.
yeah, it's like we talked about that, and as two guys who have trained kicking disciplines, like the mechanics of that's very difficult. That's not an easy kick to
Not
pull off
easy.
with that height disparity, and like even his build and everything. It's just that just seems like a near impossibility to get the heel up that high so fluidly. But then you look at the technical brilliance of Rose Namajunas flatlining Weili Zhang, like that no switch lead leg kick. You think Kamaru Usman stripping the guard away and just going through Masvidal's jaw. You think about Corey Sandhagen with the most beautifully timed flying knee you could ever imagine on Frankie Edgar, and then the sheer brutality of Emily Ducati. Like, there's just, but man, I gotta go with Huggy Bear. That shit was just dope, man. That shit was just dope. And that's my category. It's just dope. So I'll take it. I'll take Huggy Bear.
And I am okay. I'm plumb surprised here because when you said, think of categories, you think of like championships and beating the number 2 person versus John Volante's like the number 49 heavyweight. That's impressive. Ben, are you going to speak some slap some sense into us, I guess?
No, because I mean, you two clearly gave the right answer. I'm just going to make the case for Pettis versus Horiguchi, just because it came late in the fight. It reversed the likely outcome of the fight as it was going. I mean, he was losing the fight, and there's just something about a spinning back fist because they always knock a dude out, much more knocking it out than it looks like it should. They don't look like they hit that hard, but because they hit from an angle and at a time that the fighter is not expecting, they just flatline people. I mean, you think of, Shoni Carter, Matt Serra, to go all the way old school. They look like they just go boop, and then the person is just dead. Then that's the beauty of the spinning back fist. And that was Pettis on Horiguchi. Like, it landed, but then Horiguchi goes down like a marionette whose strings have been cut, and he stays down for a legitimately scary amount of time. Yeah, just beautiful stuff, and it mattered. It was a title fight, a title defense in a division that in Bellator it matters. Like, Sergio Pettis is no joke. Kyoji Horiguchi is no joke. In fact, that fight is one of the very highest level fights that could have been made outside of the UFC last year. So I'm glad it happened, and I'm glad it turned out like it did. That's my knockout of the year.
All right, so fellas, I don't think this is going to require a lot of debating. Maybe we'll just mention some other fights that are worth mentioning. But Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler, UFC 268, fight of the year, hands down. Does anyone dare disagree with that?
I don't disagree, but I think it's closer than some people might think. I mean, it was incredible in the moment, just this unbelievable. A matchup that seemed like a can't miss action fight, a can't miss fight of the year that actually didn't miss. It helped that I think round 1 of that fight is round of the year by a much bigger margin than the fight is fight of the year. Because after that, it was a fun action fight, but the outcome, to me at least, was never especially in doubt. And also, I didn't hold out much hope that there was going to be a finish. So I was like, okay, so the rest of this fight is going to be like round 1, just less. Still a great fight. Again, still my fight of the year. But I've rewatched round 1 of that fight many times. I haven't rewatched the whole fight since it happened. Like, some other great fights that happened last year, Yuri Prochazka versus Dominic Reyes was just absolute wildness until the end. It ended. I mean, it was a perfect infomercial for Yuri Prochazka. Like, if you like this, you should go back and watch this dude's tape because this is all he does. Kind of like anyway. Rafael Fiziev versus Bobby Green, another great one. But I really liked Prochazka versus Reyes, and it was roughly for the same stakes in its division that Gaethje versus Chandler was in the lightweight division, the de facto title eliminator. And to me, equally wild fight and had a finish. Still second best, but again, the gap is smaller than you would think.
I think I'm in full agreement in that the gap was closer than a lot of people expected, but at the same time, I can't. If I were to put any 2 fights together, if I were to say Gaethje versus Chandler against Holloway Rodriguez, or Gaethje versus Chandler against Dillashaw Sandhagen, any of those, Gaethje Chandler would beat any of those one-on-one, Condorcet winner, if you will. And I think that is what really stood out for me, is that I could look at that fight against any other fight this year and go, yeah, that would be the if you put a poll out or something like that and just felt that when the big fights get made, we're fight fans first. I mean, we love this sport very, very much. I whine about Ryzen, not me having fun or anything like that. But at the same time, that is part of it, wanting to have fun. So when I see Chandler versus Gaethje being on the table officially, and I write about it, I go, this is going to be a blast. I don't have any stake in who wins. That's not what I'm here for. I might expect somebody to win, but I'm here for the carnage. Like, I think back to a fight that was scheduled a long time ago, like about 5 years ago now. Wow, my God. Where I knew as soon as that fight was booked, it's going to be absolute chaos, and I am so here for it. When Robbie Lawler was matched up against Carlos Condit, and I went, this is the fight. This is the fight. And you think of it, you go, it's going to be one of those fights where it's going to be back and forth. Everybody's going to have their moments. Everybody's about to get knocked out. Just absolute pandemonium, edge of your seat, kind of the raw, visceral fan experience that you can have watching that fight. And let me tell you guys, I covered 268, obviously, for Sherdog, and I was on the play-by-play. And round one of that play-by-play was one of the toughest I've ever had to write up in terms of momentum shifts. And he's hurt. Now he's hurt. Now this is back. Gaethje's backed up against the wall. Gaethje ducks back, hits a right hand. Chandler's hurt now. When I talk about it and I get excited, and where I talk about Jose Aldo, Rob Font, incredibly entertaining fight, very good moments, but I don't have that physical reaction that I have. Like Santiago Ponzinibbio, Miguel Beza was a lower level of that, where they're just throwing caution to the wind, and oh my God, we could just be it for a firefight. But Gaethje versus Chandler had that. And I think when it comes to me, I still cannot shake the just bleed mentality that I grew up with. I've tried for a very long time, but I can't shake it. And I'm not ashamed.
And the thing is, that fight taps into that so much. And of course, if you're familiar with Gaethje and you're familiar with Chandler, you know how technically savvy that they are. So it's the best of both worlds. I think a big problem with some of the candidates on the the fight of the year list are fights that in hindsight weren't really that close, or maybe in the moment we said they weren't that close. Like, you had someone getting absolutely destroyed, and then the other guy does just enough to survive, and
Like
he lands a couple shots.
Ortega.
Exactly, that's a great example. Or even Max Holloway and Calvin Kattar, I see listed by a couple of sites, and Max Holloway versus Yair Rodriguez, where it's like there's a very clear winner, and the loser is doing better than they were supposed to do, or they're not dying. Therefore, this is a great fight. I can't get with that reasoning. Gaethje and Chandler, it sincerely had you wondering who was going to be left standing when it was all over with. So that's like the fighter forever. That's I think we're gonna have to talk about that as far as the all-time great fights. That's up there with Robbie Lawler's title reign against Carlos Condit and Rory McDonald. Like, it's on that level of entertainment that fight was, and I think my son agrees. So,
and pushing back a little bit on what Ben said earlier, I never had a moment in Gaethje Chandler where I'm like, Gaethje's got this in the bag. Because I've seen them both, because I know what they're capable of, because I know Gaethje can sometimes tend to fade in later rounds, and Michael Chandler just can pull things out of nowhere and get Eddie Alvarez after a rough couple rounds. I never had that moment. The momentum was clearly shifting towards Gaethje, and the leg kicks were working, and he was starting to slow him down. But Michael Chandler never stopped flamethrowing, and that to me was the excitement, is that this ain't over yet. And it wasn't like Max Holloway Rodriguez, where Holloway didn't quite get his momentum like he did for the Kattar fight going, and used some more takedowns. But there were very few moments where I'm like, okay, now this is where Rodriguez is going to get him. And when I looked at Chandler, I said, dude, that one shot of Chandler can wobble his legs. And how do I know that? Because he's already done so 3 times earlier in this fight. So.
Yeah, definitely great fight that I'm sure we're going to revisit in future discussions. All right, fellas, so now let's move on to fighter of the year. I'll start with you, Jake. Your fighter of the year is
Kamaru Usman. It is not It is not the other nominees that are out there. Dustin Poirier had that for a while, even though he lost to Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira, obviously, well, yeah, I'd say obviously being the number 2, Charles Oliveira actually won Sherdog's Fighter of the Year. Usman for me had a bigger, better, dramatic year. Emphatic wins over Gilbert Burns and Jorge Masvidal, knockout wins, and with a guy who we'd be like, okay, he's kind of a coasting kind of guy who will cruise until he gets his win and then does that and lamps Masvidal in a near knockout of the year candidate. And he survived. I say survived. He won the fight, but he went through the fire with Colby Covington and answered a lot of questions I think we had of him. What happens when somebody puts the screws to him? And we saw that he was able to come back. Like people were saying, like Covington dominated them in the last rounds. The numbers were actually pretty darn close. Usman lost the round, but Covington was not 2-1 up on him. Usman kept it close. So Usman answered the questions. What happens when Usman gets hurt? Well, we found that out with Gilbert Burns. He's able to come back. What happens when Usman learns how to throw a power jab? We learned that in Burns and we learned that in Masvidal. What happens when a guy has more in the tank? We learned that from Covington. So I feel like when it comes to the ultimate Ben Duffy question, what do we learn? I think I learned more about Kamaru Usman than I did Charles Oliveira this year. And the fact that he defended his title 3 times gives it to me.
All right, Ben, what say you? Who is your fighter of the year? Do you agree with Usman getting that?
To me, it's Oliveira. I was one of the people that voted for Oliveira. First thing I'll say is, if Poirier had beaten Oliveira, Poirier would have been the fighter of the year by a landslide. 2 huge paycheck moments with Conor McGregor, like that elevated his stardom, and then to finally win a UFC title. That's off the table, obviously. He lost. But to me, I would go the opposite of Jay. I learned more about Charles Oliveira because coming into the year, I didn't think that guy was ever going to be a UFC champ. And he wins and defends, in both cases, at least against guys that are, in the picture for most deserving challenger. Like Justin Gaethje has been waiting in line, but it's not like, something just popped up out of nowhere. 2 sensational fights, 2 fights in which he had to pass through danger, which again, we got to learn this year that Kamaru Usman can survive when somebody else is pushing him. We have seen the improvements in his boxing, but to see Charles Oliveira overcome danger and adversity twice in a row to beat world-class fighters is something that we didn't necessarily know about this guy for most of his career. So to me, it is him. And I mean, obviously you have to put a hard cutoff point somewhere, like January 1st to December 31st. That's a year, but he beat Tony Ferguson 2 years before the end of 2020. If you throw that in there, like the rolling year, Ferguson, Chandler, and Poirier is a ridiculous 12-month resume.
Yeah, I find it difficult to argue against Charles Oliveira, but I will side with Kamaru Usman getting that, and I want to lump Glover Teixeira in the same argument as a Charles Oliveira, as a deserving candidates, a fighter of the year. But the thing that separates Usman, in my opinion, is we saw the technical differences with him. He switched coaching, started going with Trevor Whitman, and you instantly saw how laser that jab was in the Gilbert Burns fight. You saw his striking just exponentially improve, and he looked like a different fighter. He looked like a totally different guy than the time we saw him before, and that new version of him ran through 2021. Now, Oliveira and Glover Teixeira certainly have made better. They made better choices in the fight, especially Oliveira. Like he certainly cleared up some of the fight IQ issues, and and sort of folding under pressure at the wrong times and whatnot. But technically, he's still the same guy. He got better, got sharper in certain areas, but it just seemed to be a better application of what he already was, as opposed to someone just entirely new being put in the octagon. So that's kind of why I want to go with Kamaru Usman for that. But if you said Glover Teixeira or Charles Oliveira with the feel-good stories as far as them winning their titles, I'm not mad. If you said it was Shevchenko for the way she's run through her division as well, I'm not mad at that at all. There are some people that deserve in that mention, it deserve to be in that mention, but for me, it's Usman.
Now, just to touch on a real quick point you mentioned, I think of when you mentioned how Usman went to Whitman, you could tell immediately. I think of Demetrius Johnson going to train with AMC Pancration and Matt Hume, and you could tell immediately, not just they started training full time, but the improvements he made right in that run was right before, it was right, I believe it was after, my dates might be a little confused, but I believe it was right after the draw with Uncle Creepy. It was in the Uncle Creepy era time.
It was after the what fight was the fight that I scored against him because he had top position, but he was
Miguel
losing
Torres.
from bottom.
Yeah, the Miguel Torres.
Yeah,
fight.
Miguel Torres. Yeah, that fight.
Yeah, I knew it was right in that window of you.
And that was one of his last fights at bantamweight, so that would be just like less than a year before.
That was
the,
like right
Creepy
before
fight.
right before he got to the bantamweight title
for the
shot,
belt.
if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anyway.
All right, fellas. So now let's now I'm sure because we don't have a whole lot of fights to talk about next week, we're gonna continue some 2021 discussion, but we don't want the show to be 7 hours long. So we'll table some of it in the comments or Twitter, whatever, however you get at us. Any categories you want to see us talk about in particular, please let us know. We will throw them in the show. We'll weave it in some kind of way. We'll make it work. But let's move on to predictions for 2022. What current UFC champion will no longer hold their belt?
I think it's likely that both bantamweight titles change hands. I expect that Aljamain Sterling will either lose or be stripped this year. Makes me feel bad to say it because, again, I just think he's been done incredibly wrong in the wake of that no contest by the fans, and certainly not helped by the UFC treating Jan as though he won the fight. Like, just, basically treating his interim title unification bout as a title defense. Like, just, I mean, they're already writing Sterling out of their own history, which, again, that fucking sucks. But I mean, having said all that, Sterling comes back fully healthy. I slightly favor Jan anyway. I thought the fight was going Jan's way. I think it's a good style matchup for Jan. And, as good as Sterling is, he can't possibly have been getting better over this time that he's just been nursing and rehabbing, these nagging injuries. So I suspect that by hook or by crook, he's going to lose his title this year. And I imagine we're going to get the Pena-Nunes rematch. And even if Pena, this wasn't a fluke. It was an upset, but it wasn't a fluke. Like, it's a replicable path to victory. It's just going to be tough sledding after Nunes goes back to the drawing board with some of the best coaches in the game. But I probably still will favor Nunes slightly in the rematch. So I think those are probably the two most vulnerable champs right now.
Man, I wanted to be controversial and say something ridiculous, so I will. I think Aljo Sterling can beat Peter Yan in the rematch. And I say that knowing that Aljo Sterling has been rehabbing from neck injuries and all these other injuries he's been sustaining. So he hasn't been training and improving his game like Peter Yan has been. Well, you can tell, like fight to fight, you can tell that Peter Yan's a little sharper, a little quicker, reaction time, whatever it may be, is definitely, I am no longer rolling my eyes about Peter Yan being a great. But I think that Aljo Sterling has the kind of style that would frustrate him and cause problems in the rematch. I believe I had Aljo Sterling winning the first 2 rounds and then Peter Yan winning the third, and he would have won the fourth, but for the knee that DQ'd him. So it would have been 2-2, and probably momentum was on his side. I think Sterling that doesn't go hog wild and throw everything he has aggressively is the kind of guy that can actually beat Peter Yan. But when it comes to real controversy, Francis Ngannou probably won't be the heavyweight champion at the end of this year. I don't believe he will hold on to the belt in a similar vein to Aljo Sterling. That maybe I should have couched my Sterling point by if he gets to fight Peter Yan, period, because we don't know if he'll be able to get to fight Peter Yan if they strip him first and throw him into the back of the line or worse. The contract negotiations and issues with the UFC and Ngannou are ugly. They should not be ugly. This is not the kind of fighter you need to do this with. You want to make him the baddest man on the planet. You don't undercut him. He's worth what he's asking for. And I would bet a lot of my own money he's not asking for an unreasonable sum of money. I don't believe he's asking for Anderson Silva money, Playboys. I don't think it's the kind of crazy $20 million, I say crazy, it's not that crazy. The crazy sums of money that are being thrown out there. So I believe the UFC wants, for some stupid reason, to not have Ngannou as the champ. No, I don't know if that's because Cyril Gane isn't asking for huge money. Oh, actually, we do, because he took an interim title fight against Derek Lewis, who also didn't ask for a ton of money to fight. So the UFC is somehow going to undercut its champions in a horrifying, embarrassing way. And as for other vulnerable champions, Brandon Moreno, man, he has a gauntlet ahead of him. Even if he gets past a really bad weight cut Figueiredo, he's got tough guys to fight, like a guy he fought to the draw with in Askar Askarov. Pantoja's coming. Kai Kara-France has momentum on his side. I don't know if Moreno's going to be able to hold on to that. And I'm looking forward to find out. But I'm also really curious what Ant and Junior have to say about champions in the UFC right now.
Let's see. I don't think my daughter is well versed on the Fighter of the Year discussions as my son is, because she was born in the middle of the year, so she just missed the first half. But she'll contribute wherever she can. The first person on the chopping block for me, and as much as I want to praise him for such a storybook ending to his quest for a championship, Glover Teixeira does not leave 2022 with the belt, in my opinion. I think even a rematch with Jan Blachowicz goes different. I think he sees your Prochaska again, like that again. He's a very violent, unrelenting force. I think between those two gentlemen, Rakic even should be mentioned in this discussion. I think there's too much for him at this age, at this version of Teixeira. It has to stop at some point, and 2022 seems like a logical conclusion, in my opinion.
I thought I was the bummer on the show today.
Oh, you rubbed off on me. Bad association, man. I need to stop hanging out with you. I think we can also question Alexander Volkanovski if we get a repeat of the Max Holloway fights. Holloway came very close before. If he's put in front of him again, what does that look like? All it takes is one judge to mark a 10 or a 9 in any of those rounds, and we're not talking about him still being the champion now. So another one,
Valentina Shevchenko, obviously, when Miesha Tate drops to 125.
Yeah, obviously. I'm really agreeing with you about Francis Ngannou as well. I think the Cyril Gane fight poses serious issues, and we'll see which one of them has improved the most. Both very new to the sport of MMA and have a lot of room to expand their technical ability. So we'll see which one is going to be a more improved version of their previous self.
I look at the fighter, and then this is something I touched on. I look at the fighters on the champion list, and I think of how many fighters the UFC seems to actively be campaigning against. And it's not a non-zero number. It should be a non-zero number. It should not. I mean, we've known this for years. The UFC hated Tyron Woodley, but they just don't seem to like some of the champions they have. And that's so wild to me that my concern for who's going to hold on to the title matters before the cage closes behind the fighters. Like it is entirely possible that Francis Ngannou and Aljamain Sterling do not have a chance to defend the title next. I mean, just because of how ludicrous things are. Now, granted, Ngannou is scheduled for the end of this month, but there's just so much absurdity that doesn't need to be here. And I wish that, they'd value their champions like they value Brandon Moreno, by the way.
You can make a good argument that the 3 top pound-for-pound men in the sport didn't fight at all last year. Henry Cejudo, Khabib Nurmagomedov, and John Jones did not fight at all in 2020. And of those 3, Khabib Nurmagomedov is the only one where I am sure there's not a reasonable amount of money that would have gotten him into the cage. Like, just think about that. What we're watching right now is not the best MMA fighters in the world. Like arguably the 3 best men in the sport are on the sidelines right now.
In the primes of their careers, arguably.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about. I mean, and what a better way to transition, bless you, honey, to transition into our final question for the show. Hit or stand as opposed to swing or miss. We're going to hit or stand on this one. Khabib Nurmagomedov fights again in 2022. Gentlemen, hit or stand?
Hit me. I have no loss. If you know, if I'm wrong, you guys can harangue me on December 31st next year. I do not believe, actually this year, I don't believe that Khabib's done for good. Don't believe it. I've been hurt too many times by fighter retirements. Ben, you want to ask who hurt me this year? No, all the retirements that never happened. Rashad Evans is going to fight Gabriel Checo in a little while, because let's do that. That's cool. What other retirements or unretirements are happening at Eagle FC 44? There are so many fighters who you're like, yeah, they're never coming back. Miesha Tate's starting a family, and she's joined one championship, and that means she's never going to come back here. Well, now she's planning on relocating to 125 after a couple fights at 135. Fedor, how many times has he retired? There isn't a retirement, I believe, in this sport anymore, unless you're above the age of 45, and that's crazy. Like Uriah Faber, I don't believe Uriah Faber had his last fight, and that's crazy to me, because he should have had his last fight 4 years ago when he had his last fight. So I am hit me that Khabib will fight this in a cage, sanctioned. I'm not talking about a slap fight in a parking lot or in a stands. I think that Khabib will fight again. There is an amount of money, and they will finally pay it. Maybe Jake Paul will be the one to bring him back. No. Hold on. I don't mean Jake Paul to bring him in for his promotion. I mean the actions that Jake Paul is taking.
Okay.
Fighter pay
about to say, like, you think?
No. I'm not that crazy.
All right.
I'm crazy,
Ben,
but I'm not that far off.
Oh, you're definitely crazy, because I'm going to ask Ben to talk some sense into you.
Please, hit me.
Tell me why Khabib does not fight in 2022, Ben.
Because Islam Makhachev will be UFC lightweight champ by the end of the year.
So then why didn't you say that Charles Oliveira is the most vulnerable lightweight on the roster, or lightweight champion? Yeah.
Because I think it's more likely that the other two I named, like I am very certain that Aljamain Sterling will not be champ by the end of the year. Even if he beats Jan, they'll do a
that
trilogy.
Is an outstanding point that you raised.
And even if like seriously, like, you know, yeah, so like I'm more certain that the other two will change hands. But no, I think it's very likely that Islam Makhachev will be UFC lightweight champ by the end of the year. That is an effective roadblock to Khabib Nurmagomedov coming back. I agree with you that he's probably not done, but it's not this year.
Is there before you say something, Ant, is there the possibility that Khabib, as a, you know, he knows what this is like from Kane and DC coming back at light heavyweight? Is it possible that Khabib in his comeback could go, well, you know, 170 sounds good. I hate cutting weight anyway. Or am I so far off the map, Ant, that he's never coming back?
I mean, it's. I think when you look back at the history of MMA retirements, you're not crazy for saying that an MMA retirement isn't going to last. But I think in this case, like, this is a man who is so firm in his convictions, who was repeatedly wined and dined by the UFC. They tried to do like a LeBron decision special ahead of a ABC card to see what he was going to do and stuff. And
it was more like Al Capone's vaults. Like, yeah, there wasn't shit
like
in
nothing,
there.
like nothing. And he wasn't budging. And then you talk about, like, with the exception of his friend and teammate Islam Makhachev being there, like this, the rest of it is easy work for him. Like, he's beaten just about everybody that you have to beat to get there, and the people that he hasn't beaten, we're pretty sure he would steamroll. So it's like, okay, you're gonna throw X amount more money at me to do something that I could do in my sleep. Oh man, this would be easy, but he turned it down because of his principles. I think those principles still hold up in 2022. And unless this man's mother and literally his mom, if Mrs. Nurmagomedov says, "Son, I want you to fight again," this man ain't coming back. And I can't think of too many mothers that are encouraging their sons to jump in a cage and get punched in the face for money. So
Tyron Woodley.
Khabib very smoothly stays in his role as successful MMA coach, and takes on this Eagle FC venture with his full gusto. That's his life in 2022. He is never touching competition again. All right, so I think that's going to do it for the first edition of The Living Death, or the latest edition of Unleashed, however you want to call it. That's what it is. So we're done for this one. So remember, like, subscribe, share, tell a friend to tell a friend, tell that friend to tell 10 more friends. You can find me, Jay, and Ben on the social media platforms, Twitter mainly, but you see the handles right there. Follow us, like us, ask questions, whatever the case may be, and follow these two gentlemen's work on Sherdog.com. Now, you got to stay beautiful. You got to stay positive and stay sexy. I'll see you when I see you. Peace.